Today I have with me a humanitarian who brings awareness to Christian persecution around the world. She's an advocate for religious freedom, a motivational speaker, and also is the founder and creator of her organization, For the Martyrs. Here's my conversation with Gia Chacon.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
We're here in Washington, D.C., my first time here, like we were talking a little bit behind the camera. And like I said as a joke, this is the first time I feel like the government really nailed something. This place is awesome.
Totally. It's so pretty.
So to start off this interview, I have a quick question for you.
Okay.
You can talk. You're 26 years old, I believe. You're a young woman. You have the looks. How come you didn't dye your hair blue and grow your armpit hair out and scream into your phone? How did you go this route instead of the way that usually a lot of women nowadays tend to go in today's society?
Yeah, you mean how was I protected from like woke progressive ideologies?
Yeah.
Honestly, I think I have my mother to thank for that and my family. First of all, my family is very conservative, not just politically, but in their Christianity and their theology, very conservative family. But really, even from the time that I was young, my mom just had such a powerful influence in my life and encouraged me not only to have a personal relationship with Jesus, but also to know what my identity was and that my identity was found in Christ. And I think through the years, that was just kind of like the foundation of my identity and my purpose. And obviously, it wasn't until later on that I came to found For the Martyrs and figure out what my calling was. But I think deep down it's because of my mother's influence and instilling that importance of having a personal relationship with Christ.
What about your father? Was he ever an influence in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have been grounded if I dyed my hair blue. Like, we were that conservative. Like,
I was going to say, a strong father presence,
totally,
right?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Actually, even like, at school, like if you wrote like with Sharpie or like you would like do drawings on your skin or like make a little fake tattoo, we would totally get grounded if we did something like that.
Yeah.
I think we were scared of getting in trouble and maybe it just like lingered.
So you've dedicated yourself since I believe about 2019, 2020 to this organization that you founded and created, For the Martyrs, which we'll get into all of the events that you have coming up for it. But this is what I want to know. So it's a nonprofit, I believe.
Yeah, 501c3.
And you gave up a career in makeup. You thought you found a career that you absolutely were in love with. You gave it up because you found this new calling. Your grandmother took you to Egypt. You found this organization that she had as well, where you went to the Middle East and you helped displaced people. You saw the way that people were living over there, and it was a life-changing experience for you. But this is what I'm curious about. How do you make a living? How are you surviving? How are you dedicating all of this time into this one organization where you're not really making a profit? Isn't life about also money and the balance of helping people out?
First of all, to answer that question, I'm really grateful for my family for supporting me because, I told my mom when I was 23 years old that I had been working for my grandmother's organization as a missions coordinator. So prior to founding For the Martyrs, from the time that I was 20 to 23, I was working for my grandmother's nonprofit, helping her with her overseas work as well as with some projects here in the United States. And then when I was 23, I went to my mom and I was like, okay, I'm going to quit my job with grandma and or stop working for her nonprofit, and I'm going to start my own nonprofit, which was definitely risky. But my parents and my family have been very supportive, and really thanks be to God. I mean, he's just opened the doors and he's allowed me to continue to do speaking engagements and kind of make it a personal income for myself while I'm working for, the persecuted church. So
got it. And so speaking of persecution,
it's not glamorous though. I mean, it's certainly not, a lot, right? Yeah.
And we'll get into that because this is what I'm curious about too, because you're constantly talking about persecution. We'll get into that. But first, nobody really knows today that Christians are the most persecuted people in the world. Right. Excuse me. And so with that in mind, why are we the most persecuted religion in the world right now?
Yeah.
I have an idea. It's like, well, at one point we had the Crusades, right? Is this like the pendulum swings back and eventually something has to happen? Or what's the reason why Christians are most persecuted?
A lot of people make that argument, and it's funny because when we share about, for example, Christians being persecuted in Nigeria, it's so interesting because we have like haters or like, trolls on Instagram that will like comment on our posts and be like, oh, this is a result of the Crusades, or like, this is what you get as a result of like white colonialism. And it's like, I don't know what Nigerian Christians have to do with white colonialism, as if they somehow deserve persecution. But, you know, I think we really can't ignore the spiritual aspect of this, that it was written. Jesus told us, if the world hates me, they will hate you too. And he promised persecution. He said, no servant is greater than your master. And he said, you will be persecuted for my name's sake and for righteousness' sake. So, you know, persecution is nothing new to the body of Christ. We were founded really on persecution. The apostles were persecuted. The early church was persecuted. But
So it's human nature.
yeah, but, you know, there's a spiritual component here. But, you know, I think what people don't realize, I think when we think of persecution and we think of martyrs, we think of this early church persecution. We think of
Death.
Yeah, we think of like Neronian persecution and like going in the Colosseum and being torn apart by lions. But there is actually more persecution in the body of Christ today than any other time in church history. There are more Christians being targeted and killed for their faith today than even in the times of the early church and the apostles.
And I can attest to that because, so for example, I went to Starbucks to meet a friend one time, and they completely disagree with me about 99% about politics. So I decided to meet with them.
Yeah.
And this person...
To convert them?
Well, it would have been nice if I was a good enough communicator back then. I could have gotten something across, but I wasn't that good. This was about 2-3 years ago.
Okay.
And so he used to be a Muslim who converted to atheist. And I don't know if you can convert to be an atheist, but he's now an atheist.
Sure.
So I knew providing facts was futile. They don't ever want to agree with what you say because they think they know everything. But when I mentioned Christians are the most persecuted people in the world, he laughed in my face and said, yeah, right. Like, that's not... true at all. And I was so baffled by that. So confidently he said that statement where I just didn't know what to say, so I kind of just let it go. But I'm Assyrian.
Yeah.
90% of the Assyrians that live in the diaspora, meaning outside of our birth region of Iraq, Iran, we live all across the world now due to Christian persecution.
Right.
Our cousins died, our ancestors died. The 1915 genocides, ISIS beheading our people, the most recent events that took place in 2015. So I firsthandly know this, but the world doesn't know this. So that's why I feel like it's an important conversation to be had with, and seeing a young person such as yourself bringing light to it is encouraging.
Yeah, I think a point on that, what's interesting is, and whenever I talk to somebody who's not Christian, or even some Christian people, it's shocking when we say that Christians are the most persecuted religious group. And there's almost like a resistance to believe that. But it's not just religious sources that are producing these statistics on persecution. It's Pew Research Institute, which is a secular research institute that's reporting that Christians are the most persecuted religious group. So whether or not it fits the narrative, whether or not it's a comfortable reality, the truth is that Christians are the most persecuted religious group.
And does that play a role as to why Islam is the world's fastest growing religion?
You know, I think in some degree it does, certainly, because, I mean, look at what ISIS, their campaign against Christianity in Iraq and Syria, it was convert, be killed, or pay the jizya tax, and eventually be killed.
Right.
So there is a level of this, you know, hostility and maybe somewhat of a forced conversion. But I don't know. I think that also, I wouldn't put the blame fully on that. I do think that in places like Iran, where it's illegal to convert from Islam to Christianity or to another faith, maybe we don't know the real statistics on how many Christians are living in a place like Iran, how many Christians are living in a place like North Korea, where it's illegal to say that you believe in God.
There's underground churches, so we can't even...
Right.
Yeah.
But also, I will say that I think that especially like Western Christians, they've lost the urgency to evangelize and spread the gospel. We're a very inward focused people. And also we're like afraid to offend people. And it's like somehow sharing our faith, we're afraid that that's going to offend someone. So I think there's a couple things playing into it.
You know, it's interesting you say that. Just a quick sidebar. So I have a shirt that I recently got. It's called Jesus is King. It has Jesus is King written on the back of it. And I almost made the same mistake I did back when I was in Jordan when I was a kid. I made a mistake where I took my cross off due to fear of getting caught in Jordan. We were in the middle of nowhere. And so out of fear, I talked about this with Benil Dariush, the UFC fighter. But on this trip, you hear a lot of things in the media. You're afraid of the way that the world is, the being embarrassed of talking about your religion. So I almost didn't wear my shirt, Jesus is King, out. But I said to myself, no, you're not going to make the same mistake again. You're going to wear whatever you want. You're also going to represent your Lord and Savior. I also wear my cross everywhere I go too. So, but just in the back of your mind, they put that in your head that you should be embarrassed about talking about this and representing this. And it's like, it's subconscious now where they make you double think.
When you say they, who do you mean?
The mainstream media, anything that goes against the narrative of the public and the way that the world perceives religion today.
Right, totally. And it's actually Christians are disproportionately targeted with this narrative. Like, it's okay to be something else. It's okay to be Buddhist, it's okay to be Hindu, it's okay to be Muslim.
Everything except Christian.
Yeah, but if you're a conservative Christian, then somehow, it's seen as a very negative thing.
Okay, we'll get into that right now because you brought it up. So, can you be a Democrat and a true Christian?
That's like, I don't like answering the question like that, but I do think that Christians have an obligation to use the power of our vote for good. And if we are voting for politicians and policies that align with killing innocent human life in the womb, if we are voting for policies that agree to pushing trans ideology to kids, taking away parents' rights, blocking the Bible in school.
Which is aligned with a lot of Democratic policies.
Right, then we are complicit. We can't say that we're voting for Democrats and not being complicit in pushing those things. So we have an obligation as Christians to involve ourselves in politics in the sense of our vote matters, it means something, and we are going to be held responsible for those things. So would I answer the question, can you be a true Christian and Democrat? I don't like answering it in those terms, but I do think we have to be aware of what our vote means and who we're voting for and what we're complicit with. Yeah,
I mean, you have traditional liberals, which 30 years ago, if I were born in this age, I truly believe I might have been a traditional liberal, seeing that the way that they talk, they're more aligned with the middle today. I'm a registered independent, right? So,
whoa.
Yeah. So I'm not concerned. I like being in the middle, but RFK Jr., he's a staunch Catholic who's running as a Democrat, and he doesn't believe in all of this crazy far ideology. So there are people I believe that I think you can be Democrat and also a Christian, but
unfortunately with RFK Jr., like, I agree with a lot of what he says.
Yeah.
But then he's also pro-abortion. So it's it's like, can I, in good conscience, knowing that abortion is one of the number one issues, if not the number one issue, the number one tragedy in the United States, I don't know if I can be complicit with voting for someone like that.
When I was 19 and 20 years old, this is when COVID just hit, and I was extremely getting into politics at the time. And so I had a subscription to the Daily Wire. Just my favorite thing to do is at lunch, I would put on Ben Shapiro's podcast and just listen to him. And
on 2-speed.
Yeah. And a lot of the conversation at that time was COVID.
Yeah.
And, there was mask mandates. I was getting really frustrated with the mask, and I found all the rules to be really stupid. And I just got annoyed. And I was a 20-year-old kid. I was the most healthy and fit I was in my entire life. And so I thought I wanted to be really rebellious against it because it didn't apply to me, I felt like, right? And then I just one day after day realized that Ben is reporting about constant corruption and how disgusting the world is, how much evil there is. I got sick. I threw my headphones out of my head. I was like, how does someone listen to this day after day and not get sick and tired of hearing this? I had to delete the Daily Wire. I unsubscribed for a while. And I was like, I need to take a break. This is destroying my mental health. Like, I constantly hearing bad news. Then I realized this is also a business model.
Yeah.
Talking about one side and how it's bad constantly, I was like, how is Ben not getting frustrated and going crazy about reporting the stuff every day? And then I realized, he's profiting off of it.
Right.
So it's a legitimate form of business, and that's why I realized the majority of politics is. But here's my question to you. You are constantly hearing about persecution, bad news about Christian families. You tell a story about a girl whose brother was killed in front of her. I believe she was an Assyrian or Chaldean woman.
She was, yeah, Chaldean.
And when you say Catholics in the Middle East, the majority of them are Assyrian or Chaldean. Mm-hmm. And so I can just assume that. But you hear these bad news and stories all the time. How do you not get tired? How do you not get sick? How do you not throw your hands in the air and be like, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah. Great question. You're right. For what we do with For the Martyrs, not only are we working to support persecuted Christians, but a good chunk of what we do is trying to bring these stories to Christians in the United States and Christians in the West. So part of that is doing research. Like I'm constantly reading what's happening in the Middle East. I'm looking for the stories that aren't being reported on enough or that are not getting enough attention. And a lot of times they're devastating. It's hard to read. But also what I've learned through my work and what continues to be the truth is that Christians who are persecuted are also, they suffer unbelievable atrocities for their faith. They're suffering like American Christians wouldn't be able to believe, let alone withstand. And still, they're a joyful and triumphant church. So when I meet a Christian who has lost everything for their faith, but they have this beautiful hope in the life to come, in eternity with Christ, and their love and joy radiates out of them, that's what keeps me going. Because even though the church is persecuted and the church is in some places facing a genocide and numbers are shrinking, still they are a triumphant and joyful church. And it's inspiring, and it does something for my own faith too. When I hear what a Christian in Egypt is willing to do, lay down their life just to go to Mass on Sunday, or that they're willing to risk their life to go to a retreat, and in many cases they lose their life, that the fact that their faith was so real to them, that Jesus meant so much to them, that they were willing to sacrifice everything for him, does something for me in my faith. And I think that just as the Christians overseas need our prayers and our solidarity, we need these stories, and we need the faith and the bold witness of the church around the world who are persecuted for their faith.
I see. And so, like I said, we're here in Washington, D.C. You have a very big following, and it's still growing to this day. It's going to keep growing. You're doing a great job. And a lot of people, we talked about a certain individual that we both know who reached out to you, and I was surprised about that. So people are getting, you're getting on their radar. And so with that in mind, after seeing how the world is going right now with Andrew Tate, and I don't know if you heard about today, what's his name, Russell Brand. I don't know if you heard the news with him.
No,
he just got, I'm going to put it in quotes, convicted of a rape case.
Whoa.
And he's one of the most anti-establishment reporters in the world right now, even though he used to be an actor. So you see all of these narratives and stories coming out of all these prominent individuals speaking out against something. And all of a sudden they start getting canceled or these allegations come up. Are you worried about government or media coming after you, canceling you, shadow banning you? Do you have any of that going on right now? Or
Yeah, it's been going on since the beginning, since we started talking about Christian persecution. For the first 3.5 years of founding For the Martyrs and pushing our content on Instagram and Facebook, we were banned from running ads simply for saying things like Christians are persecuted or support persecuted Christians, aid persecuted Christians in Iraq. We couldn't run any of those ads. It was blocked for being sensitive content or violating Facebook terms. So why is it that the term Christian persecution is a violation of Facebook and Instagram's terms of service? That happens. That has happened to For the Martyrs on the organizational level and through running ads. Also on a personal level, I've received a lot of personal hate. I've had death threats. I've had people that said, if I see you in my country, I'm going to kill you, or your funeral is going to be so amazing to attend. So it's not just the media. It's also individuals sitting behind computers that are, for some reason, really angry about me talking about the truth of what's happening to Christians around the world.
Right. You know what's interesting? Before we go any further, I realized something, speaking about cancellation, is when you're saying something prominent, regardless of who the individual is, no matter how controversial they are, whatever they're saying usually is the thing that ends up being canceled. And what I realized is when Christianity is the most attacked and canceled religion, I realized, it must be true simply after the fact that it's continuously being attacked and suppressed. It has to be true.
Yeah.
Okay, so in today's culture, let's shift a little bit. We are, due to Amazon Prime delivery the next day and how fast our internet...
Sometimes same day.
Sometimes same day, exactly, even better. and high-speed internet and being able to drive wherever you want really quickly. We are a group of people that don't like to wait for things. We want instant gratification, right? And so with that in mind, you once told a story with another interview. You said, I looked at myself in the mirror. It got to the point where I didn't recognize the person looking back at me.
Yeah.
And then you said you did a prayer the next few days. That was when you joined your grandma's organization. You guys went to Egypt, and then this has led you on the path that you are today. And you said, God answered my prayers right away. When people don't get what they want in this world, they tend to get antsy. You saw the way that in COVID, CPU shortages, people couldn't buy computers, they couldn't buy cars.
Yeah.
The blockchain or supply chain issues were happening, and people couldn't buy Pokemon cards or whatever it was. You couldn't get what you wanted the day of. You had to wait a week or 2 weeks.
Totally.
So everyone was freaking out. Now imagine a person in today's society who doesn't have a strong relationship with God, who then prays to have something answered from God, and then God doesn't give it to them because, he works in mysterious ways, delayed gratification, and there's a lot of instances where you may not get what you're praying for in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the timeline may be. So do you think that when people hear your message, when they're trying to get into religion and Christianity, they're like, oh, well, Gia's prayers were answered so quickly. Now she has this amazing life where she's doing what she wants. But when I prayed for something, it didn't happen to me that fast. Why? Why is that? What do you have to say to that?
I have a couple answers. The first thing is, and what a lot of people breeze over, is that for like 2 weeks, my life was hell. It was like, I prayed. So really, like, what happened for those listening that may not know the story, and it's definitely available, on YouTube and across social media, but you hit it right on the nose. Yeah, so for those who haven't heard my story before, and what Emmanuel is referring to is my conversion story. So reversion, because I was raised Catholic Christian in a very devout Christian household. But up until the time I was 20, kind of like from the time I was like 17 to 20, I was living a life where I like to say I had 1 foot in the world and 1 foot in my faith. And I was trying to maintain this balancing act. And the longer I tried to maintain this balancing act, the foot that was in the world became a ball and chain, I like to say. And it was like pulling me deeper into compromise and heartache and further away from who I knew I was supposed to be. I didn't know exactly who I was supposed to be, but I knew that the person that I wasn't who God created me to be. And so, as you said, it was like another night of drinking and going out. And when I woke up in the morning, I looked at myself in the mirror, and I really, not only did I not recognize the person looking back at me, I didn't like the person looking back at me. And so I just said a simple prayer. I was like, Lord, I know anyone who is in you is a new creation, and I want that new creation life. Now, this is the part where a lot of people skip over, and they're like, oh yeah, overnight everything got amazing. No, within 2 weeks, my life got turned upside down. Every friend I had betrayed me. And it was I think to somebody who, and maybe it was just the grace of God that I had this realization that something better was coming. And to me, I saw that as confirmation that God was working. But maybe to somebody who didn't have that perspective, they would see it as oh my gosh, I prayed for God's mercy, and I prayed for God to reveal to me a plan. And it was overnight my life got worse, and it was this 2 week period of just kind of hell on earth. But I knew that it was God answering my prayer, because I knew if it had been any other way, I was just probably too stubborn to change. And once I went to Egypt and I made the commitment to give my life to the Lord, it took 3 years for me to figure out what it is exactly that God was calling me to. And that whole time I had no idea of what exactly my calling was. And honestly, it was a very lonely time. It was a time where I didn't have a lot of friends. I was fulfilled in my faith, and I had a strong sense of identity, but I didn't know what the future looked like for me, and I didn't know where I was headed. So it was consistent prayer for 3 years, being very faithful, working for my grandmother's organization, seeking the Lord in prayer and asking him, God, what is your mission for my life? What is my calling? And then finally, after 3 years, he revealed it to me, and that's when I went on to found For the Martyrs. So my message is it's, first of all, not always as simple as it seems when I tell that story. And second of all, we don't understand God's timeline and his providence, right? His ways are not our ways. We know that. And that's an oversimplified way of saying it. But he calls us to obedience, and he calls us to be persistent. And I think if we can be obedient even when we don't hear God's voice and it seems like it's not making sense, and we can be persistent in wanting to hear God's voice and get clarity, eventually when we're ready for it, he'll reveal it to us.
Beautiful. Amen. Just want to take a quick break, and what I want to do now is I got you something.
Oh my gosh.
And so let me hand it to you first.
I'm so honored right now.
Here's that. Before you open it, I want to just explain something really quickly so people don't get confused.
Wow. This is the best podcast ever. I'm getting gifts.
So because you go to the Middle East pretty often, people may not know this, but it's customary for when a woman enters a church for her to cover her hair. I'm sure you've done that and seen that. So that is one of the hair coverings that we ended up getting for you today.
Oh my gosh. I don't have one of these, by the way.
Well, there you go. You can take it on your next Middle East trip.
Can I open it
Yeah,
and
yeah, please.
show the camera?
Please.
This is so amazing. Oh my gosh, I'm so touched right now. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is beautiful. Oh my gosh, I'm
It's
about
from
to be
Lost
like
Pattern, actually. That's their brand name.
I'm going to start promoting this on Instagram for anybody who wants to get it. Wow, thank you so much.
You got
what a touching gift. Thank
Absolutely.
you. And it's true. A lot of places in the Middle East and even some places in Europe, you can't go into the church without
The
a head
Orthodox
covering.
churches too, yeah.
Thank you.
What the hell, man?
Oh man, I'm so sorry, bro.
You just rear-ended me. Hold on.
This is Tony.
Tony.
What's up, brother?
Yeah, man, I know you're in Chicago, but I just got in an accident in Arizona.
Actually, we opened up an office in AZ.
You are? Oh, you're screwed, buddy. Injury Rights is now expanding to Arizona. Whether it's an automobile accident, pedestrian accident, slip or fall accident, or construction incident, Tony's got you covered in the Illinois and Arizona areas. Injury Rights has plenty of case results and personal testimonies to put your mind at ease knowing that you're in the right hands, with a successful track record that's open to the public. Call now for your free consultation at 847-982-9516 or go to www.injuryrights.com. Whether you're a newlywed couple trying to design their dream home, or a person who's trying to impress their friends and family, or maybe you just want to make sure your mother doesn't walk into your kitchen with a disappointed look on her face, then Galleria Design Studios has got you covered. With 6+ years of industry experience, Galleria Design Studios offers highly customizable work that will suit your needs exactly the way that you want them. And they will work with you to make sure your dream designs come true. Start off with a complimentary measurement service and a 3D rendering of your space to get the process started today. And meet the team: Oshrid Shiba, head of sales; Yolanda Orellano, lead cabinetry designer in sales; and Maria Garcia, designer in sales. If you're ready to take your first steps in creating your dream home, get started today and visit www.galleriadesignstudio.com. You're always promoting Christianity, but I haven't seen you question anything yet, and that's totally fine. But I'm just a genuinely curious person. I'm also a genuine person.
I hope you're a genuine person.
I know you're genuinely Gia. But I like playing devil's advocate because it makes me understand both sides better. So just out of curiosity, have you ever questioned anything in the Bible? Have you ever pondered life after death? What is it like? Is it just blackness? What if we're wronged? Have you ever thought of anything like that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's okay to question. I think we need to question at times so that if it can help us search out answers or seek out answers to those questions. I mean, I think, for example, I went through a really difficult time with one of my family members where my brother was really sick. And for years, it just seemed like, God, is this ever going to end? And I was having a hard time wrestling with the idea that God would allow something like this. Like, if God is so good, how could he allow something like this? But, thank God my brother is fine now and he's healthy and he's on the other side of it. But it's like, it's only until after you come on the other side of it that you see that, just as it's promised in Scripture, that all things work together for the good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose. So, there's been moments where I've had a hard time understanding why God would allow something, and I've, had trouble in the moment wrestling with this idea of why would you allow this? But it never ceases to be the case that when I look back on it, I'm like, would I wish that on my worst enemy? No, absolutely not. Do I want to go through it again? No, but I know that there's invaluable lessons in character growth and just this like raw dependence on God and his mercy in those moments that helped me grow so much in my faith. Or another example is like, you know, we do a lot of interfaith dialogue. And so when we're talking to people of other faiths, it can be easy to start to like take on this like pluralist mindset of like, you know, everything is true, or is there true? Like they're willing to die for their faith, right? Like, is that the truth? But I do think we have to really, be sober-minded about some of these questions and have the heart to seek out the answers within the faith and to ask God and to kind of take on this spirit of humility of, Lord, I don't know all the answers. You know, I don't really know what's happening after, you know, we die. I hope I go to heaven. I hope I at least make it to purgatory. You know what I mean? But it takes a humility, and part of faith is to have faith means that we don't have it all figured out, but we're believing God that his promises are true and that his word is true, even without having everything figured out.
There's been too many coincidences in my life.
Oh, for sure.
For there not to be a God.
Oh my gosh, totally. First of all, I don't even believe in coincidences anymore because I'm like, Lord, that was so you. Like, for example, here's a beautiful story. Just on Tuesday of this week, so I have been in D.C. I'm from California. I'm born and raised, still living in California. But I've been in D.C. for the past few weeks, just getting ready for our event. And so I've been meeting with the local churches, Catholic, Orthodox, and Evangelical. And I was supposed to have a meeting with a Abuna from the Coptic Orthodox Church on Thursday the week before. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out, so we ended up rescheduling it for Tuesday. And it just so happened to be that the Tuesday of our meeting was the Coptic New Year, which is based and founded in the Martyrs. Right. So they had all the relics of the martyrs. It's like the only time of the year that they have all of these martyrs relics out on display. And I just felt like, wow, what a God moment. Like, this is like, we think it's our planning, but it was totally providential to be talking about March for the Martyrs on the Coptic New Year, which is all about martyrs, and all the relics were out. So little things like that. And then, of course, big things that it's just like, that was so the Lord. Yeah.
Well, shifting a bit, do you ever have any experiences or stories with demonic possessions?
I don't. I've like seen like, I don't know. Sometimes I get really bad nightmares and I'm like, I feel like there was like a demonic presence.
Got you.
You know, that maybe like influenced the nightmare or something like that. But I don't have any personal experience with like possession or anything like that.
Got you. All right. Well, thank God, because that's terrifying. But just curious, because a lot of people who are in like the religion industry and like they're constantly around people who talk about with priests, they hear stories.
You know who has amazing stories, who maybe this would be somebody like if you would want to bring them on to talk about this and if your viewers would be interested in this, there's a girl named Simone Riscala. She's Armenian and Coptic, and she has some stories from priests and otherwise about exorcisms and kind of like the spiritual realm.
For sure. We'll talk behind the scenes. But speaking of demonic possessions, let's talk about relationships in today's society. So I believe that you've been in a relationship for about 8 to 9 months now.
Yeah.
And before that, you were single for about 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So was that a personal choice, or was it something that you saw in today's society where it was hard for you to find a man with the qualities of a proper Christian, conservative values, right principles, morals, ethics, or was it just something you were like, no, I'm not ready for a relationship. There's plenty of guys out there. I just don't want anything right now.
No, I was definitely dating. I had, I was dating in Catholic world and Orthodox world and evangelical, just like good Christian guys. And a lot of them would have been like amazing boyfriends or future husbands. But I just never felt like the confirmation from God that this was my person and that this was who God had for me. So, single by choice, and because I really just wanted to be with who the Lord had for me. And another thing is honestly, as much as I'm like a girl's girl in this aspect, to be honest. I think it's fun to go on dates. I think people take dating way too seriously, by the way, in the beginning. Like, I think it's okay to just have a cup of coffee with somebody or go to dinner with somebody and just see if you even get along.
Sure.
see if there's even potential for there to be something more serious before we start, figuring out like, well, when do you want to get married,
Yeah.
So it's okay to get to know someone.
Sure.
So I always had fun in that regard, but really I just was like really focused on what I was doing. And I just I was never in a rush to be in a relationship or get married. And
Okay.
I think that a lot of times for both men and women, there's like this sense of urgency and scarcity mindset that if I don't find someone now, I'm going to be single forever. And that's just simply not true. And I think it has a negative effect on our dating and our outlook.
Yeah. Well, this isn't the Whatever podcast, which you were on, and also Fresh and Fit. So I'm not going to get into all of that controversial things. But just curious, what are the most important aspects of finding a significant other? Is it same religion, political views, morals and values? What is like a good Christian woman in today's society supposed to look for in a man, especially people in their 20s, late teens?
I think you need to first and foremost find somebody who believes in God and who puts God first in their life. The second thing is I think that's I wish it was enough, but unfortunately it's not, because a lot of people are Christian or they're from the same maybe they're Catholic and you're Catholic, or you're both Orthodox. But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be a good partner for you. I think
Right.
you need to find somebody who understands, first of all, has a hard line on the same things that you have a hard line on, who has the same morals and values as you, who's principled and who's not going to waver in their principles by, just the feelings of the day. And I also think it's very important to find somebody who puts God first and your relationship and you second before themselves. So the order should be God, your partner, their partner or their spouse, and then themselves. And if you don't find somebody who can at least check those boxes, it's going to be really difficult.
There's a person that I look up to. His name's Gia Chacon, and he tells a story about when he was a kid, his mom would ask him, who does he love the most? And he would say, you, Mom. And she goes, no, it's the Lord first, then me second.
Yeah, totally.
So that I always kept that story in mind. And then there's another preacher. His name is Emmanuel. I'm sure you've seen him on social media. This guy's super popular. He's an Assyrian priest. And he says the number one thing you should look for in a woman is her love for Jesus.
Yeah,
That
totally.
is the only thing.
Totally.
So when you look around in today's society and you see the way that young women are acting, for the most part, this is a very general thing, right? Where they go out, they're promoting promiscuity and dressing a certain way and drinking, smoking, partying, all these things. But then you have young women such as yourself, which, by the way, you don't need 20/20 vision to tell that you're an attractive young lady. And it's just a psychological thing where when you see an attractive person doing a certain thing, you're like, oh, it's okay to do that because this good-looking person's doing it as well. So I hope you know that you have positive influence, because people are like, oh, this young, pretty woman is doing this thing of promoting Christianity and being this proper individual. I want to do that. So I hope you know that you have that influence in the world.
Thank you.
But I need to understand something. Do you have friends that don't align with you at all and you still make it work?
I have friends where we don't see eye to eye on things, but not friends that don't align with me at all. So like, for example, I have some friends from high school where one of my best friend, her name's Alana, she's Christian, but she definitely lives a different lifestyle than I live. But there are the main things. She's extremely loyal. She's a good person. She's not wild or promiscuous or anything like that. So we don't see eye to eye on everything, but because of the history of our friendship and the person that she is, yeah, we're still friends. And I also think, like, would I be friends with somebody who was super promiscuous, going out all the time, like a crazy, wild girl? I just don't even think whether I was, Christian or not, that I would relate to that person. Mm-hmm. But also your friends definitely have an influence on you, but likewise you have an influence on your friends.
Right.
So even if I don't see eye to eye with some, like for example, I have two best friends from high school I've known for a few years. We talk about really deep things. We talk about the wounds in the culture. Are they sold out Christians? No, but they know what's going on and they don't agree with it either. And I have to believe that God is working in their life.
I see. So if I'm right, you're Lebanese, Mexican, and Sicilian.
Yeah.
And you've been to the Middle East. You've been to Egypt, Iraq, Syria?
I've been to the Syrian border. Yeah.
You've made it to my home country before me, and I'm Middle Eastern.
I was in Nineveh.
There you go. Yeah, you've beat me to my home country. And honestly, no matter what people are saying, I doubt I'll ever go there. The closest I've been is Jordan and Lebanon. But what was the sentiment like for a non-Assyrian to be in the Assyrian homeland? Were you interacting with the churches? Were you going inside the churches, talking to the people?
Yeah. So, first of all, I was there to help internally displaced Christians who, even after ISIS, still are unable to return to their homes and their villages. So, Christians who are internally displaced, for those who may not know, it's kind of like refugee status, but within your own country. So you're not able to return to your village, but you're displaced within the country. So you're living in a place that's not your own. And for the situation for Christians in Iraq, it's absolutely heartbreaking. They're living in office buildings that were converted to apartments, and oftentimes there's maybe one room and a large family. So it's very difficult to see the situation. So yes, I was interacting with a lot of Syrians. I also was working with the Chaldean Catholic bishops to understand the situation for Christians. Post-ISIS, I went in 2021, so, a number of years after the military defeat of ISIS, because there are still ISIS soldiers and fighters and affiliates in the region. Yes, I was with the bishops, and actually one of the most amazing experiences. So I went to the very northern part of Nineveh, to one of the oldest monasteries, and I actually was able to go inside their caves.
Were you in Mosul or Al-Kosh?
Al-Kosh.
Yeah.
And so I was able to actually go inside the cave churches, and it was just like to be in a place where Christians have celebrated Mass. Yeah. And have, fled persecution and just like had this like amazing, deep, beautiful faith for literally centuries. To be in that place was like, whether you're Assyrian or not, whether you're Catholic or Orthodox, I think to be in that place, it's like there's no way to not be inspired and to feel connected to it.
Did you feel like you were in danger at any times?
No, I think I have something wrong with me. I don't feel danger.
You're making me sound like a scaredy cat right now.
I know.
You make me sound
Honestly,
like a wuss.
People ask me that all the time. They're like, did you feel scared? And I really think I said I have something wrong with me, but I think it's the grace of God for what I'm doing, is that I really don't feel scared. I haven't yet, praise the Lord. But I will say we try to use wisdom. We try to understand in a very like honest, real way what's happening. Is it safe for us to go? Is it safe for the people for us to go? And so we've been safe up until now, and God willing, we'll continue to be safe. Yeah.
My people are going to be mad at me for making it sound like such a dangerous place. I'm just paranoid, but...
Yeah, it's actually funny because we hired private security from the U.S. Army. And
that's when I would go.
So he was like special ops with the U.S. military, and he was like, red hot, no. Do not go to Nineveh. It's absolutely unsafe. He said we contacted the U.S. Embassy and the State Department, and they literally said, if you go to Nineveh, write your will. Literally. I have the email that says, like, get your affairs in order, give your passports to someone, write your will. Wow. It is not safe for you to go, and we can't help you if you go. But it was like...
And you still went?
Well, because of the people. We were working with the bishops, and we were working with the people, and they gave us maybe a like more on the ground, accurate, I don't know,
assessment of what's going on.
Assessment of what was going on.
Absolutely.
So we listened to the people over the advice of the military, which I don't know. I'm not advising anybody on anything. I'm just saying what we did.
Right, that's a coin flip. But so Gia, to wrap this up, please spend some time on talking to me about March for the Martyrs.
Yeah. So March for the Martyrs was born out of like a response to the cries from the persecuted. Whenever we were doing, whether I was working with my grandma's organization or later on overseas, our For the Martyrs initiatives that were developed overseas, we would ask, and we always ask, what's the greatest need? How can we help? How can Christians in the United States help persecuted Christians around the world? How can we help you here in Iraq? How can we help you in Armenia, wherever it is? No matter if they're from the Middle East or they're from China or they're from South America, when you talk to someone who is persecuted for their faith, in response to what they need most, they will almost always say these two things.
Pray for me.
pray for me. First, they'll say, please continue to pray for us. And second, they'll say, thank you for knowing and caring about our suffering. So March for the Martyrs was a response to the cry from the persecuted. They want the body of Christ in the West to pray for them and to be in solidarity with them. And we have an obligation to be the voice of the persecuted. So on September 30th in Washington, D.C., we will be hosting our 4th annual March for the Martyrs. And it's going to be absolutely beautiful. We'll have survivor testimonies. Our keynote speaker is a woman from Iran who converted away from Islam and began evangelizing in Iran, and she was put on death row. So she's going to tell her testimony. We also have experts on the issue, and we have also some bold pastors and priests who are going to be talking about the spiritual component of persecution. So we really encourage everyone on the East Coast or otherwise to come to Washington, D.C. We need the voice of Christians in the United States to be a voice for persecuted Christians around the world, and you can do that at March for the Martyrs.
Gia, thank you so much.
Thank you.